Wildlife Federation's The Hide.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. Mark Kakich and Taylor Finger at the Horicon National Wildlife Refuge in Mayville, Wisconsin with The Hide. Well, today we're focusing on Bird Fest, the Horicon Bird Fest, and how conservation plays a role with birding both in rural settings as well as urban settings, and some of the diversity and funding that's, needed for that, but also on some of the challenges that we have, conservation funding as well as birding, especially in urban metropolitan areas.
And what better place to be at for, a birding festival here at Horicon. The amount, I was flying the duck survey 2 weeks ago when we flew over here, and the amount of birds that we saw on this property was unbelievable.
Well, let's hope they're here in the fall.
Right, yeah.
So
more reasons than one.
Right. So most people don't realize that Horicon Marsh is funded by federal duck stamp dollars, and 98 cents out of every dollar comes back to conservation. And in this case, you have a wetland of international importance right here, smack dab in the middle of the state of Wisconsin. And every year, just shy of 400 birds are recognized every year flying through and stopping either in the spring migration north or the fall migration south, here at Horicon.
Right. I mean, just outdoor recreation statewide produces $8.71 billion to the Wisconsin economy and over almost 90,000 jobs. So just in birding and outdoor recreation as it relates to birding and hunting and just this general area, I think it's 70% of the state's population is within 100 miles of where we sit right now.
Yeah, and when you come to Horicon, we've done seminars at multiple locations, and it seems every birding group, at least 90 to 95% of the folks that participate in birding at some point, especially if you live in Wisconsin, visit the marsh every other year to every year.
Right. It's the largest cattail marsh this side of the Mississippi River. It's one of the premier places, whether they're going to stick around all summer long or it's a stopping location during the spring and the fall. This is where you should be if you're going to be birding.
Growing up in Milwaukee, I was, I think, privileged that we have some great birding in the city. But then every fall, we spend a significant amount of time during hunting season, watching the goose migration. And countless times we would pull over on Highway 49 and watch thousands and thousands and endless waves of Canada geese, migrating into the state and coming here to Horicon. And right now, that's not necessarily the case. Things have changed significantly.
Yeah, I mean, that was, Horicon was the place in the entire country for Canada geese. I mean, back in the 60s and 70s, you would have 300 to 400,000 Canada geese essentially staging here. There were no Canada geese anywhere else in the state, but sitting here at Horicon. And now we don't see that. We don't see those huge concentrations, not because there's less Canada geese here. It's just that they're spread all over around the state. They're in every retention pond. They're in every city park, every golf course, and what they've done is they've decoyed those birds that traditionally migrated to Horicon and staged here into all of those locations. So, but not that being said, we just drove down the road here and saw, 9 pairs with broods of Canada geese on one highway. So there's still a ton of birds around.
Right. And, growing up and coming here, you never saw swans in Horicon unless it was during the migration. Right. You never saw pelicans. You never saw, cormorants and a few other what I would call new visitors to the marsh on a frequent basis. But getting back to the geese, you also have that other opportunity, or I guess the pinnacle in Wisconsin birding is conservation funding here in Wisconsin is fairly strong. And habitat, even though it's shrinking, we have some very good quality habitat here in the state.
I mean, we have 5 million acres of wetlands. We got 15,000 lakes. We bordered by 2 Great Lakes, the Mississippi River, and then Horicon Marsh right in the middle of it. We have a ton of awesome habitat. And fortunately, through our entire process that we have, is most of it's publicly owned, and then it's protected because it's publicly owned.
And everybody thought I brought you here because of your good looks.
Right.
But really, it's because you're an encyclopedia.
I'm just hitting it with the facts.
The man of facts, right? So, one thing that we see is, I work in the city every day in Milwaukee, and I do a fair amount of birding, taking up, Lake Michigan shoreline and in some of the parks And the number of different types of birds, I mean, you see warblers, multiple woodpeckers, and so on and so forth. But in the city, they're also facing some significant challenges.
Right. Yeah. No, some of the big challenges that we do have here, especially for, I would say, songbirds, your cats and your predators are the huge challenges. I mean, over almost between 1.3 and 4 billion birds are estimated to be killed by cats each year. And then because we don't have a strong fur or trapping industry right now, there's a lot of things like skunks and foxes and raccoons that all are going to be eating ground nesting eggs. Are taking a pretty significant impact on these smaller birds, or even up to Canada goose and duck size as well.
And one of the other things, I just was working with some of my guys in downtown Milwaukee, and I was walking along the sidewalk of a building that had, let's just say, a lot of glass on it.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I saw from point A to point B walking along that building, there was 5 birds that, songbirds laying dead on the street. And there was a person that was out there picking them up with gloves on and going to dispose of them. And so I asked the person, I said, gee whiz, does this happen often? And she said simply, multiple times a day I have to come out and take a look and see what's along the sidewalk. So that made things, an eye-opener for me. And as I left that, I hopped on 43, and what do I see laying on the side of Highway 43 is a barn owl. Well, how many times do you see a barn owl anyway?
Right.
There's a reason they're on an endangered species list, right? So, wow.
Right.
What can we do as conservationists to help the birding community and help the birds become stronger and have a better habitat?
Right. Yeah, there's several programs out there, and it's actually quite cheap I know here at my picture windows at my house, just the other day I had a grosbeak fly into one. I'm like, oh no. And I went out there and flew away, thank God. But we're putting up, you want to put up essentially lines on your window that can be clear, that you can see through, but from what doing some research on it, you want to put up vertical lines along glass because they don't want to fly through vertical lines, whereas it's a horizontal line, it's like flying underneath a fence. Okay. So that's something that they, we can make it. But if it's a vertical thing, they just won't want to do it. And then there are a couple of programs for like big city or huge glass buildings that they are putting stuff on there for a different type of reflection so they can't see themselves in it. And it's really not all that costly to do. So
as far as Wisconsin goes, we're doing things to be proactive, right? And one of the topics of great debate over the last 12 years has been climate change, right? And climate change is a significant factor on birding as well as migration.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, some of the models that we've been at a flyway level, we're trying to deal with this with all the way from Mexico to Canada. How are you going to manage these species and this resource if in 50 to 75 years Wisconsin looks like, Kansas City? So again, are those birds leaving? We're finding that, compared to, say, 30 years ago, Canada geese migrated all the way down to southern Illinois, got into Tennessee and Kentucky. Now, they don't leave if they don't have to, and in most cases, they don't have to because we don't have snow depth that's deep enough. Things have changed pretty significantly in just the last 25 to 30 years, and that's just one species. What does it mean for everything else?
Yeah, and the significance of the weather events that we have where the averages are changing, but they're changing because of a short window massive dump of snow or short window rainstorms where, those storms when they roll through are much more severe, much more impactful. You don't have those 2 or 3 days of light rain during the summer. You just might have 1 or 2 days of heavy rain and then 3 or 4 weeks of almost drought in many cases.
And if that happens at the wrong time, you've just wiped out all the nests of, say, like woodcock or turkey or, ground nesting songbirds because you just got 5 inches of rain in a day and a half, and that, they can't sustain that. And then the other side is, oh yeah, well, we got all that rain and now we haven't had any rain. We don't have any brood ponds or things like that for production. So what looked really good at the beginning of the spring, now in the middle of the summer, because you haven't had any rain whatsoever, is now looking pretty tough.
Well, right now, 2023 across the Midwest, Canada, water tables are up in many places.
The Dakotas are wet as they've seen the last almost 10 years.
And it couldn't have come at a better time.
Agreed. Yeah, we saw record drought conditions in Prairie Canada and the Dakotas in 2020 and 2021. So them getting really, really wet conditions is definitely going to boost production of all of the birds that use that area.
So coming back here to Horicon, we used to have just a gem, right, back in the turn of the century, right, in the early 1900s. But all of a sudden, some things changed. And one of the things changing was we never had cattails in Horicon, right? But now Horicon Marsh is inundated with cattails.
Cattail desert in some places,
right?
Yeah.
And then there's other invasive species that take a foothold, whether it's purple loosestrife, Phragmites, and all these outside elements also play a role in migration and how long those birds nest. Will they stop here? Will they nest in the spring, or will they migrate further north, or do they venture out? And then a few years ago, they created a fairly significant a turbine farm on the east side of the marsh and in the northwest corner towards Fox Lake, and that also over time played a significant role in how birds would migrate in and around the marsh.
Right, yeah. Especially with the wind turbines, it's there's the belief that those blades are actually the things that are going to be causing most of the problems. The birds are going to fly into them, or they'll say that's really not the issue. It's what is the area that they've displaced because they've been put up there. So they're like, oh man, that used to be a spot that we want to go. It had pretty decent wetlands or had some fields that we want to go, but now it's being taken up by that. Where are we going to migrate to now? Then again, they don't just seem to shift over a field or two. They're like, well, we don't want to be here anymore because those things are there. So yeah, that's we think that this is a green energy thing, and it is green energy. It's good, but we have to do a lot of hard thinking about where we put wind farms, where we put these solar panel farms and operations, because if they do negatively impact the resource, what does that extend? Yeah,
and I just asked my wife, it looks like they're building a significant size solar farm, east of the marsh as well. And if that's the case, I asked her, what are the impacts that might have on, migratory birds or local birds here? And then she said, it's not just birds that will be impacted, right?
Yeah. Insects, a lot of the inverts, just anything and everything that would use that as a corridor to travel, all of a sudden now you have a lot of activity, you had a lot of maintenance, the entire climate has changed because it's going to be that much more hotter above and below those solar panels. It has changed. So when we, a company comes to the state or the federal entities come to, a refuge and say, hey, we want to do this anywhere near you, they have to do an assessment to say, can we do this? And if so, what are the impacts that could be on the resource?
So as we spread out through the state, the further north you go, the timber industry plays a role as well in birding, and it has pluses and it has negatives because of harvest, right? But just like fire, there's something that's needed to create regrowth and more healthy habitat, right?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, we talked to our foresters. Wisconsin is as forested right now as it was since people came to live here. It's not the huge, giant white pines that we used to have. It's a lot of what were tiny farms that now they don't have people on them, and they're growing back up into timber stands. And we just don't have the capacity as a timber industry to get out there and actually cut those. So things like woodcock or things like grouse, things that really need that young successional forest. A lot of our songbirds need that young successional forest. If we don't get out there and cut them, they just become these big, huge, stale forests that aren't really all that good for birds.
So all in all, though, going back to what I said earlier, Wisconsin is a very healthy habitat for migrating birds, both in the spring and in the fall.
Just because we haven't seen, huge landscape changes. So look at Florida. If you go over the last 50 years, Florida's almost become an entire town, the whole state. Whereas say, over the last 30 or 40 years, we're going the other way in terms of, hey, we become more forested. We tend to have more habitat. We might see in the southern parts of the state where we're consolidating some of these bigger fields. But generally, we've maintained really stable habitat, and that's why we have a really healthy birding population.
Well, a few weeks ago, we had Bill Smith, and we ran into Bill Smith and Adam Payne and basically asked, are we going to get back and take a look at climate change? Are we going to take a look at clean air, clean water, and focus on, some of the very basics that we have that have a significant role in quality habitat? And the nice thing was, it was a resounding absolutely. Yeah. And those are goals that are back on the plate. And I think, the birding community, the hunting community, the fishing community, but every single person in the state benefits from that, right? Clean air, clean water, and at least investigating the effects that potential climate change has on our resources.
Right. I mean, again, it's the ecological goods and services we always talk about is that, you may be somebody that lives in Milwaukee, in the outskirts of Milwaukee, or you live along the Fox River, and you've never hunted, you don't really care about all that stuff, but you sure don't want the Fox River to flood every single year. So that's important to think about wetlands, because those will end up not helping you not have to worry about flooding or flood insurance. So recognizing that everyone needs clean water to drink, everyone needs clean air to breathe. So how do we communicate with that subsection of people to care about how we conserve nature, how we conserve the resource?
And you drive down the road around here, and there's a lot of farm country, ag land, and you see a lot of farmers tiling their fields. You see a lot of farmers taking out the tree lines, the hedgerows, and all those have an impact on the hawks, the owls, your songbirds, turkey population, right? And so on and so forth. Everything has a role. Every piece plays a part, right?
Yeah, and it's having the discussion about tiling is tough because they're farmers. They have a livelihood. This is how they make their money. But as a wildlife person, man, it sure, when you fly over all of these fields and you can see exactly where that water used to run because now there's drain tile there, it makes it that much more tough. And then when you have climate change and issues like that where all of that water's running, for example, like Madison a couple of years ago, all of a sudden Madison was flooding and people couldn't figure out what was going on. It's like, well, every field has been drain tiled for 60 miles in every direction around Madison, and that's the lowest spot on the landscape. Right, it's all going to run to one spot.
Yep, right? You're at the bottom of the funnel.
Yeah, and so now all of the money that has to be put into trying to figure out how do you mitigate that.
So let's take a quick break, short break, and we're going to bring in a special guest, Bill Peterson, who's the project leader for this area, the Leopold District. So he's in charge of the islands up by Green Bay, Door County. He's in charge of the Leopold management area, Fox River, and Horicon.
Yeah.
I'm probably missing a couple others, but he's a great guy. So let's go dig him up. He's around this place somewhere. Okay. Right?
Sounds good.
Let's dig him up and bring him back, and then we can get him on the mic.
Perfect.
Be right back. Welcome back, everyone. Mark Hackich, Taylor Finger, and our special guest, Bill the Man Peterson, project leader for the Horicon and Leopold Management Districts. Bill, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking your time today. Bird Festival right here, Horicon Bird Festival. And I want to hear from you what you think of being able to come here at Horicon, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Refuge, and look out these windows every single day you come to work.
Yeah, I'm really lucky. Thank you. So, as you said, Horicon Marsh is an incredible place. It has been for thousands of years, and this is the largest cattail marsh in the Americas. The only other larger cattail marsh in the world is located over in Iraq and Iran. They have a much larger one. But it's a great spot. It's changed a lot over the years. It's been dammed and flooded. It's been drained. Things have shifted to more cattails, but it's a resilient place and still a great place to see wide variety of birds.
So here at Horicon, you're tasked with controlling the invasives, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the things that you guys here at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service use, or the department, or private groups? What are you using to help control cattails and other plant species that are invading here and making it, a very difficult place for all of wildlife, not just birds, but, it might be fish, it might be, salamanders, all types of wildlife.
Sure. We take an integrated approach. So particularly if you look at our smaller sub-impoundments on the north side, we manage with a combination of drawdowns and sometimes burning to create good habitat, believe it or not, for muskrats. They eat cattails, and but they really don't like these invasive cattails we have out here. That's a problem. But when we draw Horicon Marsh down in the spring, especially that May-June time frame, we start to get bulrushes and a lot of other foods that the muskrats really like. So we draw down in the spring, leave it drawn down over the summer, ideally for 2 years, and then start to reflood things. Muskrats move in, they're eating the bulrushes, a lot of those other good foods that have grown up, but they're also building houses and also feeding to a lesser extent on the cattails. They're creating that nice mix of open water and thick vegetation that rails, herons, ducks, and so many animals like. And then over time, if things go well, the muskrat population builds. They eat most of the cattails and things start to get too open. And 12 to 14 years later, we repeat the cycle and draw that water down.
Okay.
I know on the state end, one of the things that they've been trying over the last handful of years is burning during the wintertime, just because then you don't have to worry about it getting out of control. It'll eventually hit a ditch full of snow and you don't have to worry about it. And it really burns off that top biomass. And then again, like you said, opens it up in the springtime for muskrats, for other things to get in there and again, open up what was, this a huge monoculture of cattails.
Yeah, and one thing we've learned just as with, you think about western prairies, burning off the grass creates great springtime forage, grazing areas for buffalo back in the day. Burning off cattails here kills a lot of that rank old cattails, and the new growth is better food for muskrats.
Okay. And so everywhere we go and we talk to the public, one of the things that comes up is chemicals and pesticides. Now, unfortunately, in some cases, you have to use it. But that's almost a last-ditch effort to control. But here on the marsh, you guys do use chemicals at some point to control cattails?
Yes, we do. More so Phragmites, but also for cattails.
Okay.
Are you guys going through, I know the state right now is contracting with some new companies that use drones. You can use a drone and they'll get right down over a spot and be able to use, those pesticides or herbicides to try to kill off those things. You're way more controlled than, say, 30 years ago where you flew over in a crop dusting plane and dropped all of that stuff and you had a lot of wind movement and stuff like that. So is that something you guys are looking into?
Yeah, they're doing great work. So there are some differences between the state and federal sides, and the federal side is one of them. We're essentially not able to use drones for habitat management right now, only for emergency response type of uses. So that's not a tool in our toolbox right now, but hopefully in the future we'll be able to do that.
Nice.
And, to get that tool in the toolbox, I think stakeholder groups play a role in helping the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as other groups, get some of the ability to use those tools in the toolbox, right? You guys here in Horicon have some great relationships with a few stakeholder groups. Why don't you tell us about some of those relationships?
We have great partners. First one is Wisconsin DNR, a neighbor to the south. Love working with you. You guys have the dam on the south side of the marsh, so everything you do affects water from the south side to the north side. So good relationship with you.
Talk about a controversial issue, is holding that water back or giving too much water. It's one of those things that it's a very touchy subject for us to manage, is how much water do you hold back? How much water do you let go? And then, what are the user groups that impacts?
Well, every spring, every fall.
Yep.
It's kind of like, when should opening day of duck season be? You're never going to make everybody happy.
Right.
And you're never going to make everybody happy with the dam water level.
But the nice thing is that we're managing it for wildlife. We're managing it for plant communities. So again, the idea is that trust the experts on how we're trying to do this, because we have, the resources' best interest in mind.
Absolutely. You guys do a great job, so I appreciate that. Another partner we have is the Friends of Horicon National Wildlife Refuge. We're here today for the Birding Festival. If you could see the rest of the room, we have beautiful displays, junior duck stamp presentation.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that tonight.
They do phenomenal work to help support everything we do here, whether it's visitation, maintaining our infrastructure, and wildlife habitat around the marsh. Tremendous partner. Elsewhere, the Horicon Leopold complex covers a big area. So we work with National Park Service, Dane County, quite a bit around Madison. Further north, we have the Friends of Plum and Pilot Islands. They go by FOPI, up around Washington Island area, and they are also incredible partners.
Can't talk about an awesome birding area up on Washington Island, up in Door County. Those areas is absolutely beautiful.
So I kind of saved this for last, but I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up, where would this marsh be without Ducks Unlimited, right? Ducks Unlimited has made a career-long, lifelong investment to Horicon, and it's continued, and there's no stopping it. When you look at the future, the DU has always been a very strong supporter and kind of an insurance piece to make sure that this great marsh gets what it needs when it needs it.
Yeah, they really fill a special role both for the refuge and state wildlife area sign, providing engineering so that we can improve our water control structures and dikes, biological expertise to help improve our management, and quite honestly, funding so that we can complete some of those improvements and keep Horicon Marsh healthy and available for people to enjoy.
Right. Yeah. Their ability to leverage, funding, like we give them $1 and they work through their entire process and turn that $1 into $4. And so you can get 4 times as much work done with some of these partner groups and organizations because of their ability to leverage that. And like you said, their capacity, their ability to get around and have that, relationship with other entities to make these things work is essential.
Yeah, I mean, they're a huge supporter of the Learn to Hunt program here. Without them, that we definitely wouldn't be where it's at. And conservation, let's face it, they are probably the biggest hunting source of money for conservation, especially around here. They definitely put a lot of money into the marsh, and it shows. But let's talk about some of the properties that you manage here and you oversee as the project leader, on how we can go use these properties and go birding or hiking, and what are some of the things that we can do on the properties, and what are some of the things that you would think we could do but maybe we can't do on the properties?
Sure. So the Fish and Wildlife Service's approach for national wildlife refuges is to look at the important conservation roles that we're serving. In this case, staging areas for ducks and geese during the fall where they can have a safe spot to rest without disturbance. And then this time of the year, we're loaded with nesting waterfowl, but also rails, egrets, those marsh birds. Right. And so those are the sensitive times we want to limit the disturbance. Outside of that, we do everything we reasonably can to promote hunting, fishing, people getting out bird watching, and so forth. So fall hunting season through late winter, the refuge is wide open for deer hunting, upland bird hunting, and often bird watching. Really in the winter, you can go anywhere.
Yeah, it's a great place to hike.
Also midsummer, we have some great fishing spots and good birding areas this time of the year. And then midsummer, after a lot of the duck broods are out and mobile, then we open up Old Marsh Road through the center of the marsh and some other sites where people can walk, and they have some phenomenal bird watching. That's part of why we do it. It's an experience you can't get anywhere else. I see blackneck stilts, glossy ibises, young pelicans, so many other birds close up. it's worth the trip.
Yeah, again, in the fall, we go, if you're able to get into some of those refuge areas, you just see ducks that you don't see anywhere else in the state. Like, again, concentrations of pintail and concentrations of widgeon and, just other places they'd be like, oh my, I would love to see one, let alone just seeing a flock of 25, 30, 50 of them fly right over you. So again, you guys are definitely doing something right.
And speaking of migrations, while geese have spread out, you don't necessarily need to come to Horicon to see Canada geese anymore. We host some large numbers of staging sandhill cranes.
Oh my
It's quite the spectacle.
So on the sandhill crane piece, we would be, again, remiss if we didn't talk about whooping cranes, right? And how important, whooping cranes are, as well as birding, people coming to see those whooping cranes here on the federal or along the federal refuge here in and around Horicon.
And we have great opportunities for that too. We have several pairs. They're very secretive when they have young colts, so I'm not certain how well the chicks are doing today, but we have 2 active nests. One should have hatched about a week ago, and so there's likely 1 colt with them and another that's due to hatch just south of us in about a week and a half.
And again, it's you just say, oh yeah, we got several pairs. When you think about it, this population is probably close to just around 100 birds. So the fact that you have a couple of them and you have nests that potentially could be successful is a huge deal. Like, we're talking less than 100 of these in this population, this side of the country. It's the fact that you even have some is going to definitely bring people here.
Yeah. And great partnerships for that too. Wisconsin DNR, and I'll highlight the International Crane Foundation. They're integral.
Absolutely. International Crane Foundation's a new member of the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation, and they again, another great partner for the Learn to Hunt program here. But, all these stakeholder groups play a role, and that role is key for everybody's enjoyment, as well as our wildlife and habitat. Well, listen, Bill, thanks a lot for taking time out of your day and spending some quality time with us, sharing some insight on Horicon, but as well as some of the other properties. And I hope everybody out there has an opportunity to stop here at the Marsh, whether it's this weekend, this summer, this fall, this winter, because there's always something to see. There's always something to do, and it's never ending, right?
You bet. Thanks for coming.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Appreciate your time
Thanks,
today.
Mark.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Taylor.
Yep.
Well, everybody, thanks again for watching. Chase Baker with Grit, behind the mic, behind the camera. Without Chase, we all look terrible. Well, especially me. But anyway, thanks a lot, Chase, for all that you do for conservation and habitat. We appreciate your kindness and your work, and hope to see you all soon. Thanks much. Take care.